All right, so we are looking today at Socrates' speech in the Symposium. And as I said at the end of the last video, the fact is that Socrates claims that he has genuine knowledge about this topic of love, something Socrates doesn't say very often, that he has knowledge of something. But what makes it even more remarkable than just him having knowledge is the fact that he gained this knowledge from a woman. He gained this knowledge from a female called Diotima of Mantinea, a wise woman. Now, women were not perceived as being, as we've seen from some of the earlier speeches, were not perceived as being very bright, intelligent, or useful in the ancient Greek world. I mentioned that for Plato, the fact that we all stem from the same source, that the same bit of that collective soul that possesses absolute knowledge can enter into male or female, meant that he did not draw those distinctions. For him, for example, in the Republic, there's no problem with having a philosopher king or a philosopher queen. But this line of thinking definitely goes contrary to the traditional view in which women were held in the ancient Greek world. So the fact that Socrates says, look, I learned something from a female, from a wise woman, that is impressive. But let's take a look at what he says right around page 165. What do you mean, Diotima? I said. Is love then evil and foul? Hush, she cried. Is that to be deemed foul, which is not fair? Certainly, I said. And is that which is not wise ignorant? Do you not see that there is a mean between wisdom and ignorance? And what is this, I said. Right opinion, she replied, which, as you know, being incapable of giving a reason, is not knowledge. For how could knowledge be devoid of reason, nor again ignorance, for neither can ignorance attain the truth, but is clearly something which is a mean between ignorance and wisdom. Quite true, I replied. Do not then insist, she said, that what is not fair is of necessity foul, or what is not good evil, or infer that because love is not fair and good, he is therefore foul and evil, for he is in a mean between them. Well, I said, love is surely admitted by all to be a great God. By those who know or by those who don't know? By all. And how, Socrates, she said with a smile, can love be acknowledged to be a great God by those who say that he is not a God at all? And who are they? You and I are two of them, she replied. How can that be, I said. That's very intelligible, she replied, as you yourself would acknowledge that the gods are happy and fair. Of course, you would. But would you dare to say that any god was not? Certainly not, I replied. And you mean by the happy those who are the possessors of things good or fair? Yes. And you admitted that love, because he was in want of desires, those good and fair things of which he is in want? Yes, I admitted that. But how can he be a god who has no share in the good or the fair? That is not to be supposed. Then you see that you deny the deity of love. So through that argument, we find that unlike a lot of the ancient Greeks who perceived love as being a divine being, as being a god or a goddess of some sort, Socrates learns from Diotima that this is not the case, that it must be something else. It's not, there has to be a balance, there has to be a mean between two things. And of course, we're going to see that Socrates becomes that mean, he becomes that middle ground. So what then is love, I asked. Is he mortal? No. What then? As in the former instance, he is neither mortal nor immortal, but is a great spirit. He is a great daemon. And like all that is spiritual, he is intermediate between the divine and the mortal. And so Socrates is that daemon. He is that being who is capable of existing mentally in the realm of being while living physically in the realm of becoming. He can share the gap between those two things. He can spread that himself between those two entities. And so just as we have the middle ground between any two opposites, Socrates becomes that middle ground. We talked about the connection to Neo in the Matrix, and it's the same basic idea, right? Neo could exist outside of the Matrix, but mentally could go back in at any time, and because he existed comfortably in both realms and knew the truth of both realms, he could do a lot of amazing things that other people couldn't. Perhaps this is why the alcohol, the drink, doesn't affect Socrates in the way that it does the others at the end of this piece, is because Socrates has come to understand the truth that what exists in this world is illusion, what is in the other realm is reality, but we live here, not there. We should try to become like that daemon. We should come to try to be like Socrates if we want to understand love or anything else, so that we can mentally comprehend and see its existence or share its existence here in the world around us. On page 169, Diotima makes the statement when Socrates is still wondering exactly what is love. He says, love is only birth in beauty, whether of body or of soul. Tokos un kalou in the Greek. Tokos un kalou. Birth in beauty. Love is that desire to produce something which is long-lasting, to produce something which is eternal, because we're stuck in this world right now, which is a finite, temporal, limited thing, and we're trying to see something greater, something higher, something more. We want to reach that eternal that we know is real. And so we're always trying to produce something in this world that will give longevity to our existence, that will help us to touch the eternal. And so we do that through the act of creation, birth in beauty. And so this could imply, in its simplest case, just simply birth itself. When we produce a child, when we produce an offspring, there's a part of ourselves that lives on in that child. And they will produce children, and part of us will live on in those grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so on, which means that we are, in a sense, trying to touch that immortality, trying to touch that eternal nature. But it also applies in terms of anything else that we build. We might create art. We might create literature. We're looking to create something that is going to be read long after we're gone, that's going to be enjoyed long after we're gone. And so in essence, that is what love seems to imply. It implies this idea that we are trying to extend ourselves to find that eternal. And so here again, tokos en kalou, love is birth in the beautiful. For what is implied in the word recollection but the departure of knowledge which is ever being forgotten and is renewed and preserved by recollection, appearing to be the same, although in reality new, according to that law of succession by which all mortal things are preserved, not by absolute sameness of existence but by substitution, the old worn-out mortality leaving another new and similar one behind. Universal love and interest is for the sake of immortality. All right. Socrates is going to say here at the bottom of 171, there are lesser mysteries of love into which even you, Socrates, may enter, to the greater and more hidden ones which are the crown of these, and to which, if you pursue them in a right spirit, they will lead. I know not whether you will be able to attain, but I will do my utmost to inform you, and do you follow if you can. For he who would proceed rightly in this matter should begin in youth, and turn to beautiful forms, and first If his instructor guide him rightly, he should learn to love one such form only. Out of that, he should create fair thoughts. And soon he would himself perceive that the beauty of one form is truly related to the beauty of another. And then, if beauty in general is his pursuit, how foolish would it be not to recognize that beauty in every form is one and the same. And when he perceives this, he will abate his violent love of the one, which he will despise and deem a small thing, and will become a lover of all beautiful forms. This will lead him on to consider that the beauty of the mind is more honorable than the beauty of the outward form. So, we've heard the phrase that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We've also heard the phrase that beauty is from within. It's not external appearances, beauty is from within. But how do we come to that realization? Well, we have to come to it by understanding the concept of beauty itself, by coming to the form. But we do this by starting, if you look at the chart here, at the very bottom. And we look at imitations of beautiful entities, paintings, photos, reflections, shadows. And so you see that there are just simply images, pictures that are being shown there to you. So you have, a vase, you have a woman, you have mountains and trees, you have a flower. And so each of those things, we can look at that and we can come to recognize that there is a sense of beauty within that piece of artwork. But we also can come to realize that that artwork is based upon something that exists in the world now. And so we see the corresponding realities to those paintings that exist in the world, the individual beautiful entities. Those we come to understand because of the concept of beauty that exists within our mind. And that concept that exists within our mind is derived from, or comes directly from, that ultimate form of beauty that exists in the realm of being. And so we are trying to get to that core essence of what beauty is, or of what love is, or anything else which is found there within the forms. But to do that, we go through this process, which he likens to stair steps. Okay? This is a motif that we're going to see later on in the course as well. You have this idea that we start at the ground, we build to the next step, the next step, the next step, right? And we do it stage by stage. We already saw it to some degree inside the cave, right? You couldn't just be dragged out and shown the light of day and accept it. You had to go through that process of breaking yourself free, exploring your surroundings, coming to realize that first of all you've been tricked, and then seeing some of what else is the truth of the surroundings around you, making your way slowly out into the light of day. It's a step-by-step process, and that's what we're getting at here as well. For he who has been instructed thus far in the things of love, and who has learned to see the beautiful in due order and succession, when he comes towards the end, will suddenly perceive a nature of wondrous beauty. And this, Socrates, is the final cause of all of our former toils, which in the first place is everlasting, not growing and decaying, or waxing and waning. What if man had eyes to see the true beauty, the divine beauty? I mean pure and clear and unalloyed, not clogged with the pollutions of mortality and all the colors and vanities of human life. Imagine if we could see that ultimate reality. When we talk about Eastern philosophies and take a look at the Bhagavad Gita, keep this notion in mind. There's a section in one of the later chapters of the Bhagavad Gita where we have this desire to see things through the eyes of God, through the eyes of Krishna. But again, we see this idea that we have to start at the ground level and move to the next stage, the next stage. We've got to climb those stairs to be able to get to that point, to be granted that gift of being able to see things through divine eyes. Socrates is telling us that this is what Diotima has taught him, that we have to go through that step, go through those stages, and ultimately we can see. He wouldn't say through divine eyes, because he's not going to recognize deity as being love or as being beauty, but we can see through the guise of being, through that ultimate reality. And we'll come to experience the truth of all things. And only then will we actually understand what beauty is. Only then would we actually understand what love is. We can't exist as ourselves in that realm of being. But we can, like Socrates, become that daemon who exists mentally in that realm, though physically in this one. And so, Socrates concludes his speech at that point. And we find that at this point the party is coming to a close. There's a speech that's given in praise of Socrates that talks about all the great things that he's done. The revelers enter the party. Everybody gets drunk. Socrates drinks as much as anybody. They're all falling about. They're passing out. They're asleep. They're in a bad shape, but not Socrates. Socrates gets up, walks away, goes about his business, doesn't go back to bed until it's time to the following night. He stayed up all night, and there's no effects of the drinking. There's no effects of the carousing, because he's beyond that. He's not going to be touched by these earthly things. Okay. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed the symposium. And next time we will go ahead and move on to take a look at Aristotle.